Hi, Dr. Shukla. Thank you for your time and for discussing stem cell therapy in Parkinson's disease. This is a question that's very common in Parkinson's clinic. All patients are asking about what is the use and the prospects for stem cell therapy. Can you tell us more first, what are stem cells first?
Stem cells are forerunner cells. These are the cells that have the ability to generate all other different cell types in the body, including the brain cells. Stem cells can be obtained from a variety of sources. One common source that we know of are the embryos, the embryonic stem cells. They are referred to as the pluripotent stem cells. So they have the potency of generating plural type of cells. Another source are the adult stem cells. They can be seen in the gut, heart, muscle, bone marrow. Their role is essentially for maintenance and repair. They are slightly more committed compared to the embryonic stem cells. So they are actually referred to as multipotent stem cells. And these cells, the body often, time to time, takes help of for generation of the lost tissue. For example, the stem cells in the muscle help us in regeneration of muscle fibers. There are ethical concerns related to the use of embryonic stem cells for research, but now scientists have figured out a way of programming an adult cell to become the immature cell. It's called the induced pluripotent stem cell. So for example, if we have a patient with Parkinson's disease, his own skin cell, we can program the genes for it to become the immature pluripotent stem cell, and then we can fast forward for that cell to turn into the nigral neuron, which we are interested in the context of Parkinson's disease.
So you mentioned these nigral cells in Parkinson's disease. Can you tell us more why we're interested in stem cells in Parkinson's? How would that fit in this disorder?
Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disease, which means there are areas in the brain where the cells begin to die. One common area is the substantia nigra. Nigral degeneration results in less dopamine, and there are a lot of motor issues resulting from that. Patients suffer from slowness, stiffness, tremors, change in speech. There are also other non-motor areas which also shows degeneration, and brain cells are beginning to die here. Thinking about stem cells, if we have these cells which have the ability to generate the type of cell that you want, you can see how it can be used for treatment of Parkinson's disease. We can transplant the stem cells, we can ask them to turn into the nigral neurons, and as a result, we can see some motor improvements. So they definitely hold promise.
And as you know, for the last few decades, there have been a lot of studies where we're trying to transplant tissue or cells into Parkinson's, whether it is Parkinson's adult patients with Parkinson's or animal models of Parkinson's. Some of the cells were derived from fetal tissue, and they're mainly from a part of the brain of the fetus called the substantia nigra. So what have we learned from all these studies that have been done in the last few decades?
Initially, we had great experience of using nigral neuron transplantation, fetal nigral neuron transplantation for treatment of Parkinson's. But when we conducted the gold standard randomized controlled studies, there were disappointments. What happened is, although we were able to successfully transplant the nigral neurons, the fetal nigral neurons, into the adult Parkinson's disease brain, and these nigral neurons were able to establish the right connections, produce dopamine, there were some motor improvements, but these motor improvements were seen mostly in a subgroup of younger patients. There was also a lot of placebo response, and the patients, although had motor improvements, they also developed something called runaway dyskinesia, by which I mean is that they were having these abnormal involuntary movements in the absence of dopamine, and that was a big problem. Then, because these neurons were coming from a foreign source, we had to give these patients immunosuppression. And down the road, what we observed is that although these nigral neurons initially did well, they eventually succumbed to this whole Parkinson's disease process, which was very disappointing. Overall, we have learned lessons, and we are going to apply these lessons when we conduct clinical trials with stem cells.
So from these lessons that we've learned, let's say a patient comes to your clinic, asks you about referral for stem cell therapy. What is your recommendation, and why would you say yes or no for that?
So I tell them, I explain to them what are stem cells, and I explain to them where we are, which is right now we are in the research phase. Stem cells are not really available for clinical treatment,
Okay.
although you may hear, these patients often hear of stem cell clinics all across the world. There are reports coming from China, Argentina, Russia, Mexico. There are also some reports published in literature. And these clinics, I don't know how these cells are really procured and how they are implanted, but the reports say that some of these patients ended up developing tumors, which brain tumors or spinal cord tumor. And the logic is that, remember I told you that these stem cells can create all different types of cells, in the body. So some of the undifferentiated cells, like not all cells will successfully, turn into the nigral neurons, and some of the undifferentiated cells can eventually end up creating a tumor, and that could be a big problem. There are other challenges with stem cell treatment in Parkinson's, which is although they can replace the nigral neurons, which will take care of the motor symptoms, but then there are all these non-motor areas which we have to think of, which we cannot take care of if we are just focusing on the motor areas. But stem cell research holds a lot of promise as well. Because we can generate these brain cells, we can actually create a disease model in a dish, disease in a dish. And then we can test different drugs, how to take care of this, how to take control of this disease. So pharmaceutical companies would be excited because it would be much cheaper to do some studies in the dish.
So it seems that the treatment with stem cells is quite promising and exciting, but still needs a lot of research for us to be used for clinical practice. And then if a person is interested in stem cells, the best way to get these stem cell therapies would be to participate in a clinical trial in an academic institution.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shukla, for your time.
Thank you for inviting.